Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick update on my experience with the Sony RX100 Mark VII. Now, I've only had this camera for a little bit. Literally, this is day 2, but I know a lot of you are wondering, is it worth the $1,200 US? Now, that really depends on where you're coming from. Do you own a previous RX100? If so, which generation, and what feature set is most important to you? Now, as a still camera, this is very similar to the RX100 Mark VI. The biggest improvement, of course, comes in the autofocus system. In fact, that's where this outclasses every previous RX100 before it. When it comes to low light, yes, we don't have a faster lens. We have the same one from the RX100 Mark VI, which is why it's so similar to the Mark VI. If you're looking for faster glass, you're going to have to go back to Gen 5, the 5A. You'll also get an ND filter there you won't find here. But autofocus being, I think, this camera's biggest bragging right, both in still and video, right now we are in video mode, really is something that you don't necessarily expect from a point-and-shoot pocketable camera of this stature. So I really like the real-time tracking, not trying to be cute, it's legit, folks. And then the eye focus, the eye autofocus that I'm so accustomed to, finally being here. It detects both humans and animals, not all animals, but enough. I've already tested it on my Gato, and it is impressive, to say the least. Now, in terms of the other improvements you get for $1,200 when comparing this to previous generations, beyond the autofocus itself, which I'm telling you right now, it is just beyond superior. It's another league, the autofocus. That's not in debate whatsoever. The other critical things, and this is the long and short in short form. Microphone jack. For those of you that have been waiting, your answers or your prayers have been answered. You now have a microphone jack. So if that's what you've been waiting for, cheers to you. For me, that's not a critical thing, but definitely better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So it's on board. Makes it more versatile, makes it something that I think inherently is more valuable even if I'm not out to use it all the time. The other thing I want to point out is no problem with the EVF. If you remember from my coverage of the RX100 Mark VI, there were some issues with the diopter moving from constant opening and closing. I can happily report that is not an issue on this model. I've stress tested the hell out of it. It's not moving. So Sony knew there was an issue and rectified it. And that is part of why Sony right now is numero uno. Spanish is not the theme today, but it just happens to be the mood I'm in. At any rate, moving on. So we've talked about autofocus. We've talked about no problem with the EVF. Talked about the mic jack. The other big thing is video. When compared to the previous gens, that's why I was in the video mode at the top of this video. It's because we now have control of the threshold. So we are still limited to 5-minute videos, but we can go in and flex the actual temperature of that setting. So let me find it again. It is there, I promise. I didn't memorize the menu system yet. And by the way, you'll notice as I go through this menu that this is one of the things Sony does need to work on. I'll be the first to say it. It's got to be back at the other end. But in spite of needing some reconfiguring, redesigning of the menu system, maybe finally giving us a touchscreen, it just does everything well, both still and video that I've shot with this thing so far. I'm just impressed. And that's not to say the RX100 Mark VI is not completely competent. It is. It's still an amazing camera. And if you own the Mark VI, you probably don't need the Mark VII. That's a video for another time. At any rate, still looking. Oh, there it is. You know, I passed it a long time ago. So right there, you can see the setting, which you can set from standard up to high. And that's going to be your difference maker in terms of your threshold for recording video. And a lot of people have been bragging about how long they can shoot. Well, where I live, it's hot as hell. So I will be doing thorough tests. I haven't done enough yet to give you full feedback on that, but I can tell you that is going to make a difference. Now, whether or not you want it to get hot, that's going to depend on how you brace it, how you hold it. If it's inside of a cage, on a gimbal, then you probably won't care. If you're holding it in your hand, though, you're probably not going to be in love. Now, if I go to auto, which I feel a lot of people who purchase this camera do like to live in auto, I've got the high burst mode on. that 20 frames per second is impressive. And we had, fast autofocus on the RX100 Mark VI, but I can tell you now, it was not anywhere near as accurate. Every test I've done in studio and outside, differentiating subject from foreground, background, and actually locking on, this camera is able to do it at a rate that I just do not see with any previous RX100, and that's critical. In my opinion, one of the differentiating factors, as I've already mentioned. So the last thing that I'm going to point out, I've gone over, a little bit of the menu system, why it's, a substantial improvement when it comes to video, but active steady shot. I mentioned it in my preview, I mention it here again. Why Sony waited this long to incorporate a feature that is in crappy action cams is beyond me, but with that, despite the fact, or in spite of the fact that it will crop what you are filming, you actually will have steady enough footage that you will not need to travel with a gimbal anymore. Those are really the core elements, in my opinion, that differentiate the RX100 Mark VII from all preceding models. So while it is very, and I mean nearly identical to the RX100 Mark VI, outside of the fact that it's got the mic jack, the new autofocus, the threshold temperature change for video overheating, all of those things, the real critical difference for me is that active steady shot and the autofocus system. If those aren't important to you, then you should be looking at previous gen models. That's what I will say. But overall, really happy with this camera so far, and I'm just going to continue to put it through more paces and give you more feedback with time. Of course, comparisons are going to follow, but I already have a fairly good feel of how this measures up with the Mark VI and Mark V. So stay tuned. Those videos are coming. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button, and as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.